It is now my great pleasure to introduce 5 members of the freshman Democratic congressional class. Please join me in welcoming to stage Congresswoman Houlihan, Congresswoman Chrissy Houlihan, an Air Force veteran and former entrepreneur and educator, represents Pennsylvania's 6th district in Congress. Congresswoman Veronica Escobar. Ms. Escobar, who represents Texas' 16th district, is one of the first 2 Latinas elected to Congress from her state. She is also the first woman elected to the seat. Congresswoman Mickey Sherrill. Congresswoman Sherrill represents New Jersey's 11th congressional district, a former Navy helicopter pilot, U.S. attorney, and federal prosecutor. Ms. Sherrill is the first Democrat to represent her seat in 34 years. Congresswoman Deb Holland. Congresswoman Deb Holland represents New Mexico's 1st district and is one of the first 2 Native American women elected to Congress. A former chair of New Mexico's Democratic Party, she is the freshman class representative to the House Democratic Steering and Policy Committee. And last but not least, Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, a former CIA intelligence officer representing Virginia's 7th congressional district. Ms. Spanberger is the first Democrat to hold her seat since 1971. Joining these history-making congresswomen on stage is my colleague, the Hill's editor-in-chief, Bob Cusack. Bob, over to you.
Thanks, Brittany. Got a big crowd here today. First of all, congratulations on all of your elections. You're part of a historic class, a huge class. The first question is usually easy, so I'm going to start with the softball. And I want you each, and Congresswoman Houlihan, to start with you. Just briefly describe what all your lives have changed. You've now transitioned from the campaign trail to Capitol Hill. What has surprised you about life on Capitol Hill?
Sure, and it's awesome to be here, and I'm kind of sitting up straight because I have this big microphone in my back, so my mom would be proud. I think the thing that's most surprising to me is just how hard people work here on the Hill. The culture here is an incredibly hard-working culture, and definitely out in our communities, the biases that people who are here in Washington are not terribly hard workers, that they aren't terribly committed, that they just come here to sort of benefit from the taxpayers, and it couldn't be more false. I think this work week here is probably 70, 80 hours a week, and everybody does it, 6 or 7 days a week. And I come from an entrepreneurial heritage and a military background, and I value that culture of hard work. And even if I don't necessarily agree with your ideology or your politics, I think it's remarkable that everybody's here to make a difference for the nation.
Congresswoman Escobar.
Thank you so much for hosting us, and thank you all for being here this morning. It's great to see such a huge audience. It's such a privilege to serve El Paso, Texas, the safe and secure U.S.-Mexico border. And thank you, and a great privilege to be here. I agree with Chrissy. I've been in public life and done public service for many, many, many years. I served in local government for over a decade. I've run campaigns before. I've been in politics. I've been a teacher, done a whole lot of other things. I've never worked this hard in my life. I feel like we need to be cloned. And actually, I'm looking at my scheduler right now. I feel like we're supposed to be cloned because we're supposed to be 3 places at once. Our committee hearings, I have committee hearings at the same time. I look at my calendar and I think, how does anybody do this? How is anybody expected to do this? And so literally, and I thought I was the only one, but it's so heartening to hear that other people are going through this and have gone through this. But I'll be in a committee hearing, trying to listen to the questions and the answers and really understand in depth what's going on, because I'm still learning. I'm brand new to Congress. And then I'll get a text from my legislative director, you need to run down to your other hearing because votes are about to be called. So I sneak out the back, I run down the hall, run down the stairs, run over, sit down in the next committee hearing, act like I've been there all morning, and cast my vote, and then run back. And it's a lifestyle that is really, nothing prepared me for it. Juggling 2 offices, we have a local office, we have a DC office, staff there, staff here, issues there, issues here. So it's a lot of multitasking, which is why more women should serve in Congress, because we know how to multitask. But that's what was really surprising. It's by the time I get home at 9 o'clock, I think, oh my God, I just left the apartment. I just left. What happened to the day? And I'm exhausted every night, and you get up early and you do it all over again the next day.
So the thing that's most surprising to me as I go onto the floor of the House, I keep telling people back home that the floor of the House on the Democratic side feels like New Jersey, because we have people of all different backgrounds, all different religious persuasions. We have people who identify as LGBT. We have a lot of women now, and it's very exciting and innovative, and it feels like the future. And I think the most surprising thing to me is, how did it take us this long to get here? I look around and I think of how long we've had women in Congress, how long we've had minorities in Congress, and just now we're so excited that we've reached the 20% threshold for women. And it's just shocking to me, because I was in the military, and this was stuff I was dealing with 25 years ago. So how are we just here now? So I'm very excited that we are, but it's certainly something that I think we need to continue to move forward on.
Congresswoman Holland.
So for me, if you just watch the news or read the newspaper, you get this idea that DC is so partisan, right? Like, we're always fighting, we're always ready to duke it out and stand up for the things that we're moving forward. But quite frankly, there's a lot of bipartisanship that happens, and everyone's congenial to their colleagues. There's no fighting or anything like that. And in fact, this week, Speaker Pelosi signed a huge public lands bill. It was bipartisan in the Senate. It was bipartisan in the House. It passed overwhelmingly to protect wilderness, to restore the Land and Water Conservation Fund. It was a big, huge lands package that so many lawmakers agreed on. And I think we can find ways to agree on so many things, and that's really what I'd like to do, is just to make sure that we're moving our country forward for everybody.
So I get to go last. I agree with all of the observations. I would also, with the back and forth between committee hearings, I got caught last Thursday when I had agriculture and foreign affairs at the same time, going back and forth. I ran by the Dunkin' Donuts. I thought I was being sneaky, and then my chief of staff was there. I'm like, I just needed a snack in between my hearings. But I think the thing that most surprises me, and I hadn't really thought about it, so I didn't expect it to be the opposite, but I hadn't really thought about what all of these members of Congress would be like in person. And so Mikey talked about how you walk in and it's like New Jersey. But I think Mikey will make anything about New Jersey.
Or a bridge and tunnel.
But I think it's actually how funny members of Congress are and how quirky some members of Congress are. And so if you have the perspective of always seeing people in press conferences or in kind of professional settings, to then walk on the floor and have somebody doing a magic trick, or somebody being really quirky or really funny or just really personable in a way that you just don't expect. And I think that it's actually really nice to see the human side of all of our colleagues, because I hadn't thought about it. And so it surprises me only because I hadn't really ever thought about what's that next level of kind of who some of these people are. And that's been fun to see, and it's been fun to get to know people.
Can you tell us who does the magic trick?
I would say Jamie Raskin from Maryland can do some incredible magic tricks.
Okay. Broke some news today. Now, you're all history makers in a lot of ways. A few of you have military backgrounds. your districts some of you used to be held by Republicans. And this is really for anyone who wants to grab it. Can you, number one, describe the bond that has already happened with this diverse class of Democrats, but also speak of, have any of you formed pretty good relationships with Republicans?
So I'm happy to try and take a shot at that one. Yes, there's an incredible bond that I think has been formed with all of us, and it's a bond that has to do with the ability to set history in some ways, and it has to do with the ways that we've come here, whether veterans or educators or STEM professionals or first-time candidates. All of those kinds of things have allowed us to create enormously awesome bonds with one another, and I'm kind of an introverted person, and I think that it's been a remarkable experience as a 51-year-old to all of a sudden find a new community of friends. I didn't expect that would happen at this point in my life. You know, when you have little kids and you're sending them off to kindergarten, you get to know all of the moms. You know, this is a really new opportunity to really change your life and meet a ton of new people and create great bonds and friendships. In terms of the Republican aspects, I'm deeply committed, and I know most of us are, to reaching across the aisle and making sure that we have those conversations that are important to have. And so I have this, inside me, this challenge to every time I hit the floor to get to know a Republican. So I try to hurl myself across the aisle to try and introduce myself to somebody. And inevitably, whoever I choose sort of looks at me like, what are you doing over here? But it's kind of been a really nice experience, because for me it's uncomfortable to do, not because they're across the aisle or because they're across the party, but because it's uncomfortable to go and meet somebody who's new. And so that's one of the efforts that I've been trying to do. But importantly, in the Democratic Party, we're a diverse, spectrum of people too. So it's just as important with that huge class that we get to know each other all the way across the, the spectrum too. So I've been working hard at that as well.
Now, along those lines, you said you're a diverse class, and that's definitely true. Yesterday, there was a House Democratic caucus. It's been a little tense compared to the shutdown, which was 35 days when you guys arrived. The government was shut down. But there has been division. You don't all agree on Medicare for all. You don't all agree on the Green New Deal. There's disagreement on what should be done as far as a resolution regarding remarks about Congresswoman Omar. How do you get beyond that so that you get back to being unified? Our front page story is that cracks are emerging in the Democratic caucus. What's the solution, Congresswoman? What do you think of how you get everybody back on the same page like you were on the shutdown?
So my answer to your question would be, why do we all have to agree on each of those things? Because we all agree on the endeavor of making healthcare more affordable. We all agree on making forward momentum on preventing gun violence. We all agree on bringing down the cost of prescription drugs. We all agree on infrastructure investments that will help spur our economy. And then how we get to those things, that's what we're working on. And so I think it's good that we have differences of opinion, because it's the push and pull of opinions. I think one thing, Deb thinks one thing, we talk it through, we push and pull, and the whole point of that is you're supposed to come out even further ahead than if you had just let one opinion dominate and people fell in line. So I actually reject the narrative overall that the Democratic Party's divided. We're feisty and unruly, but I don't think we're divided. I think that we have disagreements, but I think you should maybe come to Thanksgiving with my extended family, and it feels very similar. And I have extended family in New Jersey, Mikey, so it's great.
Congresswoman Cheryl, do you think that this has been a challenging time for Speaker Pelosi? Not all of you supported her for Speaker, but how do you think she's done as leader of the party so far?
I would say, like a lot of people, I think this is her moment. I think that she has really risen to this occasion. Something that I have been so gratified to see in this election cycle is the power of women's voices. So as someone who has served for a long time in our United States military, and years ago a woman's voice in the military somehow sounded a little bit off-key to a lot of people, as somebody who served as a federal prosecutor, to see that now feels like our time. It feels like that our voices are cutting through the discourse in a way that I think is important and thoughtful. And I think many people are relying on women across this country to bring back a level of thoughtfulness in our legislation, a level of listening and discussing things, and I think that's what people are craving. And just adding to what Abby said, as she was talking about what's going on in the Democratic caucus, all I could think about was, yeah, that's democracy. Right? That's what our country is built on. That's the foundation of our country, and it's an incredibly exciting place to be right now.
Congresswoman Holland, before 2018, there was no Native American woman who had ever been elected to Congress. So what made you launch your campaign, and did some people say, what are you doing?
I mean, some people thought I couldn't raise the money. That was the biggest criticism that I faced. But I've been organizing for close to 20 years. I've worked on lots of campaigns. I've been in Indian country, making sure that the most underrepresented people have a voice in our politics. And I just, nobody could deny how hard I've worked for the last 20 years. And I'll say that the reason I won my primary, which was, I had 5 opponents in my primary, there's 6 of us on the ballot, I out-organized everyone. Nobody else had the campaign experience that I had had. Working for campaigns, volunteering, I've traveled every inch of my state, gone to every single county, both as a candidate for lieutenant governor in 2014 and as the state party chair, and as the organizer for various campaigns in Indian country. And I mean, to me, it was another campaign that I was working on, right? And I just feel like when you, and this is a plug for all of you to get involved, right? To help other candidates to win, because you have an opportunity if you ever want to run for office, if you ever want to do something, if you ever want to organize people. If people know you and know how hard you work, they're going to come out and support you. So that's the reason I won. I mean, I think my campaign should, I don't have a savings account. I didn't have parents who graduated from college. I didn't have money I could put into my campaign. Everything I did it from scratch. And I just want people to know that it's possible to run for office and win if you don't have anything. You don't have to be rich, you don't have to be hooked in, you don't have to be connected politically to other political folks in the state. You can work hard and you can win your election, and I just hope that more women of color who are sorely underrepresented in every level of government, from school board, up to president, that they can do it.
Mm-hmm. Congresswoman Escobar, it was mentioned the 20% threshold. What is the key to getting that number higher? Because yes, it's the highest it's ever been, but at the same time, it's still pretty low.
It is, and it's, I agree with Deb, it's even more challenging for women of color. Women of color have obstacles in place that still exist that make it very difficult to run for an office like this. So while I ran successfully for local government office, that is so different from running for Congress. And I'll give you an example. When you run for Congress, one of the tests is what Deb mentioned: can you raise the money? And in El Paso, it was such a hotly contested primary. It was an open seat. And in El Paso, we're a blue county, so the big battle was in the primary. I had 5 opponents as well. There was a Republican super PAC that was working to try to defeat me in the Democratic primary. And we knew from the onset that it was going to be an expensive race. One of the more expensive congressional races in El Paso was $250,000. Ours was almost $2 million. So that tells you, which is nothing compared to many other races, but when you put it into context, we have a very affordable media market. Mm-hmm. So media is very affordable. When you put it into context, it was a very, very, very expensive race. We knew from the onset, and so the question was, can you raise money? For women who are middle class, working class women, and in communities like mine, minority communities, we're mostly women of color, you don't have a dozen friends you can call to say, hey, can you max out to me? Can you double max out to me? That's asking my family for $100 was difficult for me because it's a different challenge for us, and so I didn't have the same kind of connections that other folks have when it comes to money. But I think to Deb's point, where there's a will, there's a way. And I think even the most difficult obstacles should not hold us back. And I think I give a lot of credit to groups and organizations that have worked hard to try to level the playing field for women, and especially for women of color, who actively not just recruit women and women of color, but who work hard to try to get rid of one of those obstacles, the fundraising. I'll give you another example of why it's so difficult. So I had to quit my job in order to run for office, so I went a year and a half without an income. And that put a tremendous strain on my family. I had 2 kids in college, a mortgage, car payments, et cetera. And so, we had to do financial gymnastics to make this happen. But I'm one of the lucky ones. I am one of the lucky ones who had a spouse with a good job who could help sustain the family, a home that we could refinance to pay off debt, and I was lucky. There's a reason why we don't have even more diversity, because the system is set up in a way that only certain types of folks can run. I look at local office, for example. Our local city council races in my community, and I bet this is true for a lot of communities, our mayor's races, really only people who are retired or independently wealthy. Who else can leave their profession midway, say, I'm going to step off this professional ladder, do something that may not be permanent. We have to run every 2 years. I'm going to be on the ballot again in 1 year. We have a March primary in Texas. And so it's a huge gamble, huge risk. If you don't have financial security, if you don't have family security, it's even more of a gamble. That's why it's so hard.
We're going to open up to questions in a few minutes. We're about halfway through. There's one word we haven't mentioned yet, Trump. Congresswoman Cheryl, do you think that infrastructure, there can be bipartisan stuff that actually becomes law, big stuff, drug pricing, privacy laws, now, especially when there are ongoing investigations of this administration and potentially down the road impeachment?
Yes. So I think we hear a lot about, should Congress be doing oversight or should Congress be legislating? We can do both. It's our constitutional responsibility to do both. And so while many of you are watching oversight hearings, many of us are in back rooms conducting legislative hearings about what new bills we're going to put forth and what's going to hit the floor. So while there are certain committees that are probably leaning more towards oversight, there are committees like the House Armed Services Committee where we're just really focused on how we move forward with our defense appropriations bill. So can we do infrastructure spending in a bipartisan manner? Of course we can. In fact, I was talking to Minority Leader McCarthy, and I said, you know what, even the progressives in New Jersey want lower taxes because our tax system right now is breaking the backs of many of our middle-class families. And even the conservatives in New Jersey want to spend money on the Gateway Tunnel project. There you go, Abby. I got it in. And he said, Yeah, of course they do, because that's what government does. So we've heard, even from the Republican side, that they believe in strong infrastructure spending. They know that this is how we move our economy forward. I just hosted a group of people who put out a report on the Gateway Tunnel. We have one tunnel into Manhattan from Jersey and one rail tunnel out. If one of those tunnels goes down, that's $16 billion, a $16 billion hit to our economy over the next 4 years, and that's just one. And these tunnels are over 100 years old. They were damaged by Superstorm Sandy. So this is a critical infrastructure investment that our country needs. So can we do that? Yes. Will we do that? I simply don't know. Why we haven't done it already, I cannot tell you. The money has been appropriated by Congress. We just appropriated $650 million more in our last appropriations bill, in February, to the Northeast Rail Corridor. It's critical. There's bipartisan support, for this investment. Why Secretary Chao in Transportation is holding up that money, why she's not approving it. She's supposed to approve $275 million that Congress appropriated to this month. We'll see if that happens. She's making all kinds of odd excuses. At one time she told me it just wasn't fair to the other states. Can we do it? Yes. Is there a large group of people on both sides of the aisle that want to do it? Yes. Will we do it? I'm unclear.
Congresswoman Spanberger, you broke a 38-year hold in your district, defeated Dave Bratt, who defeated Eric Cantor. When you go home in these first couple months, what are your constituents saying?
A lot of things, actually. We've done. I've done coffee with your Congresswoman event. We've done 2 town halls.
Have they been civil? Some town halls can get a little.
They've been very civil. They've been very civil. And I've had a lot of people come to the town halls who did not vote for me, and they've been very civil and they've been good. And but the questions I'm being asked they run the gamut. It's questions about certainly the government shutdown, questions about the debate over what to do at the border, what our appropriations bill ultimately was and what it wasn't. There's been a lot of conversation about kind of what do the Democrats stand for. I think there's been a lot of push to sort of label Democrats, and I think this gets back to your earlier question. There's been a lot of push to sort of label Democrats. Well, there's this huge caucus, let's just pick one person. Are they this kind of Democrat or are they that kind of Democrat? And I think, again, I'm gonna keep sort of pounding this drum. She's a Deb Holland Democrat, and I'm an Abigail Spanberger Democrat, and we've got a Chrissy Houlihan Democrat. We're all very, very different. We all represent very, very different districts. And so I think, in a district like mine that hasn't historically elected Democrats, they're saying, well, what kind of Democrat are you? And it's up to me to go back and affirm, I'm the same Democrat you elected, and I'm going to continue talking about the deficit, and I'm going to continue talking about prescription drug prices and infrastructure and broadband internet infrastructure, and and I'm going to be pounding the pavement in the Agriculture Committee to make sure that our soybean farmers aren't getting crushed under tariffs. And so I think that a little bit of it is trying to make sure that when we're gone, because we're in DC so much of the time, that when we're gone and the reports that people get of what's happening in Washington are a lot of the oversight and a lot of the things that frankly I'm actually not involved in because of my committee assignments. That's my opportunity to go back and talk to the district about what it is that I'm actually working on and what it is that's a little bit less exciting. Sitting in an Armed Services Committee where everybody's sort of talking about appropriations bill, that's not exciting news. And so it's not sort of the breaking news, it's not what people are getting, it's not what people are hearing. And so I think it's up to us to deliver that news back and make sure people feel connected to the efforts that we're making on their behalves.
Because, just to follow up on that, because the media is going to focus on what we do, what you focus on investigations, you focus on sometimes conflict.
Yeah.
But so when your constituents don't know a lot of the other, maybe more mundane stuff that's actually going on, and are they surprised?
I think it depends person to person, but I think that it's not so much a surprise, it's more of a, people are happy to hear about the things that we're focused on. People are happy to hear that, we didn't all just show up in Washington and sort of be repackaged as kind of whatever the Democratic Party is or isn't. so I think it varies heavily constituent to constituent, but I think it's challenging for many of us to go back to our districts and make sure that, and it's a great challenge, it's exactly what we signed up for, to go back to our districts and say, these are all the things that we're working on. These are all of the priorities that we're pursuing. These are all the things we promised along the campaign trail, and now these are all the things that we're doing. And some of it we're making progress on, and some of it, we're continuing to just be loud voices about the issues that are important to our districts.
We can open up for questions. If you have a question, if you can wait for a microphone to get to you, because we're live streaming on thehill.com, so just wait for the microphone and just identify yourself.
Yeah, it's Ayabinu. I'm Janie Parrish, and I'm from the Navajo Nation. Quick question on the media front. So, knowing all the hard work that you're doing, and you talk about the daily activities, what would you like them to focus on?
I would love people to focus on the work that we are doing that has nothing to do with the oversight hearings, and I would like them to understand that as all of us have talked about, we're all individually, I'm on Armed Services and Foreign Affairs and Small Business, and it would be really nice if the report ever came out that we were doing really important work on any of those committees as opposed to the Cohen hearings. I would love it if a reporter would ask me a question about what I was doing in the committee hearing rather than what happened in the Cohen hearing that I didn't see, wasn't part of. I think it's really, really important, and this talks to your conversation about town hall meetings. We've also had town hall meetings back home. It is kind of an innovation. The guy that I ran against wasn't terribly interested or good at them. And we do have a kind of a reset of what it means to communicate about what happens in Washington. And so our town hall meetings actually have content to them, PowerPoint presentations about what was legislatively done over the period of time. I come from Pennsylvania. We have a Quaker heritage there, and so Quaker heritage and Quaker town hall meetings have a bit of a share out to them. And so we ask people to stand up and share what their experiences with gun safety or gun violence or the shutdown or money out of politics. And so we've kind of tried to restructure the way that we talk about what government is doing for you in our community, and I would love it if that conversation could make it to the larger, the larger national body.
I have to tell you, I am very, very proud of the media right now. Obviously, not everybody, and there is a tendency, I think, by some to want sort of the inside gossip. Last night, my husband's visiting for the week, and last night when I saw him, when we got together to go have dinner, he said, I heard there was drama in your caucus meeting this morning. How do you know?
Said that
like, what? And he said, yeah, I read about it. And so I was like, wow, were you in the caucus meeting? I don't know. So there's that, right? And which we all have a natural tendency to want to know the inside drama or the inside gossip. But last night, NBC News, for example, broke the news that much as many of us on the border suspected, there is a list that the federal government has of immigrant rights advocates, of lawyers, of people going back and forth over the border to help the asylum seekers who've been pushed out of our country, who are being denied entry at our ports. There's a list. Our government is targeting lawyers, journalists, and advocates who have the audacity to help the undocumented and asylum seekers. We all suspected that list existed. I asked Whitaker at the oversight hearing. He denied knowing anything about a list. NBC News broke the news about it last night. During the family separation hearings, during the height of the family separation crisis, family separation is still happening in communities like mine. But during the height of that crisis, we were getting much of our information from journalists. There is a more critical role than ever for investigative journalists today, and they are being targeted by the president. They are being targeted by his enablers, and this is a critical time for our generation. We really are on a precipice, I think. And it's going to take everybody to get off that precipice. But right now we're getting a lot of key information from very courageous journalists. And so I mean, I've had frustrations with the media as well, but I'm so grateful to them right now.
We have time for one more question.
Good morning, and thank you for coming. My name is Benjamin Weil, up until recently the international advisor to the Israeli Minister of Energy. We spoke about women in Congress, and I'd like to raise the bar a little higher and talk about the presidency. We see Great Britain and Germany and even Israel, who's only been around for 70 years, has had leaders, female, and I was interested in knowing what can be done, especially you in Congress, to kind of encourage and raise awareness or even increase chances and make that happen.
I think we have to build the bench, which I think is what we're doing right now, and I think that even when I started running for Congress 2 years ago, I likely was not going to win. And I knew that, just by running, I would make a difference, not just in terms of pushing my congressman to behave differently and pushing my community to question whether or not he was in service of our community, but I also did it because I thought it would be helpful to future generations of young women and girls. I have 3, they're 25, 26, and 24. And I think it's really important to create the bench that allows somebody to run successfully for president or school board or any of those other kinds of things. So I think effectively by doing what we've already done and by encouraging other people to do the same, that we are hopefully heading our way towards having a woman president at some point in time.
And look, women are held to a different standard. No matter how you slice it, women are held to a different standard. And so as a country, as a society, as the media, we all have to change that narrative that, it shouldn't matter what color suit we're wearing or what our shoes look like or if we put a hair clip in our hair, right? And to me, that's what people focus on. And it's not about the policies, it's not about it's not about the compassion they have for the American people or how hard they work. It's always, there's always this, well, we're holding you to a different standard because of what you wear or how you look. So that needs to change, and all of us can do that.